Hoje, 8 de março, é Dia Internacional da Mulher. Não necessariamente um dia de comemorar, mas com certeza pensar no papel que ocupamos na sociedade. Dentro disso está o judaísmo. Uma das instituições mais conhecidas na luta das mulheres por espaço na religião são as mulheres do Muro, ou em hebraico, na Shotakota. Hoje temos o prazer de receber a Anat Hoffman, presidente do Conselho das Women of the Wall. Seja bem-vinda. Eu sou Ana Clara Buchmann, também conhecida como Malca, ativista comunitária de longa data.
Gente, desculpa pequenos problemas do home office. Eu sou Anita Efraim, jornalista e fanática por futebol. Esse é o Eu Com Isso, podcast do Instituto Brasil-Israel. E esse evento é uma parceria com a comunidade Shalom. E esse é o meu cachorro, o Dodô, Doron, para quem quiser conhecer mais. E esse é o nosso primeiro evento ao vivo e é um prazer ter vocês aqui com a gente.
Oi, gente, e eu sou a Amanda Hatzira, pesquisadora de temas ligados à cultura judaica e sociedade israelense, e hoje a gente conta com duas transmissões, né? Uma vai ser integralmente em inglês e outra com tradução para quem quiser, tradução simultânea para quem quiser acompanhar em português. Essas transmissões vão estar disponíveis nos canais do YouTube, do IB e da Shalom, então acompanhem a gente por onde for melhor para vocês.
Well, now we're going to switch to English. Anat, thank you for being with us. Toda rabah. This is so special for me. I think I've prayed with you like back in 2013, one of the first times that we were legally allowed to. And it's great to be talking to you live here almost 8 years later, probably. And it's very special because this is a women's produced and presented podcast. So I think the theme around women is very big for us. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Welcome.
So who wants to start? We made up so many questions. The audience can bring their questions as well. So who wants to start? Anita, do you want to start with one of our questions? Just audience, you can always come back to us and send us more questions so we can tag along and make other questions to Anat, okay?
Sure. So Anat, thank you so much for being here. And we would like to know, how did your story as a women's rights activist in Judaism begin? And how did the movement Women of the Wall started some years ago?
So thank you, and I hope you understand my English. I now realize you really do speak Portuguese. Yes. So how did I start being an activist? I am the sister of my brilliant brother, Roni. I was always told that it's a big surprise. How come I'm not as talented as Roni? How come I don't understand math as well as Roni? Why don't you tell Roni that you don't understand this question and he'll explain. He's the best student I ever had. Teachers used to tell me. So very early on, I wondered, how come I'm not as talented as Roni? And then there was the bar mitzvah, and Roni had a big bar mitzvah. And when it was my time to be celebrated, I was told that I'm going to have just a big birthday, and Roni is special. Roni is gifted. Roni carries the family jewels. And I started asking myself, why not me, very early on? And if you have a brilliant brother or sister and you are told that you are not as successful, not as talented, not as brilliant, and you're asking yourself, why not? You have what it takes to become a social activist, because social activists ask themselves, why not me? Why not us? Why not them? It's an excellent question to ask, and I've asked it with passion since I was a little girl. I'm very close to my brother, Roni. He is extremely talented, but it turns out so am I. How did Women of the Wall start? Sadly, I didn't realize the importance of this group I was attending a conference on the empowerment of Jewish women. As far as I know, there was no one from Brazil at this conference. And the women from abroad, they wanted on the second day of the conference to go to the wall and pray there with a Torah scroll and a prayer shawl. I immediately realized I will not join them because this is a crazy thing to do. Jerusalemites know that the wall is the discotheque of the ultra-Orthodox, and it's not for us, certainly not for women. However, the night before, one of the women, her name was Rivka Hout, turned to me in the lobby and asked me if I have a folding table because the hotel will not give her a folding table. She wanted the folding table for something that she's from Brooklyn, is called the Torah. I didn't realize that in Brooklyn, Torah is Torah. She wanted a folding table for the Torah. And of course, I do have a folding table and a megaphone. I have a few equipment that activists need. And I showed up the next day with my folding table. This is how I joined the Women of the Wall. I schlepped the table. And I saw them being spat on, humiliated, and beaten up by the ultra-Orthodox. And I was ashamed that this is happening in Israel. And after the conference was over, and after they went abroad, a group of Israeli women, we decided we'll continue doing what these women had the imagination and the courage to invent. So Women of the Wall.
What year was that?
1989.
Okay.
Women of the Wall were not, did not evolve naturally in Jerusalem, not at all. I think it was bred out of us when we were young women. It was born in New York and in Canada and in South Africa and in New Zealand. Some of the participants that came from all over the world, they are the ones who thought it. I think if it were up to us, Women of the Wall would never exist. So this is an important thing for you to realize. You in Brazil may come up with an idea that Israel really needs, but is unable to come up with it. It may be coming from you, Anna. Anna froze.
Malcolm? Okay, well. So first of all, I'm very glad to be here with you girls. And it's a privilege to hear your story, Anat. So thank you so much. And this conversation is very important, and not only because today is the International Women's Day, but because this conversation is really necessary. So it's a great privilege. So can you name some women that came before you and were inspirations to your journey as an activist?
Look, it's a bit, for me personally, I did not have many women role models. Not really, not in the school and not in the army. Sadly, no. But look, I was an unusual kid. I failed high school, but I was Israel swimming champion. I swam for Israel, and I swam for the Israeli team. We were always last, but we did fly all over the world and lose in many important competitions all over the world. And the thing about swimming, there are two things I'd like to say about swimming. One is that you cannot swim without getting wet. Getting wet is necessary. There is no way of swimming in water without being wet. And the second thing is how to swim effectively. In order to swim fast, you need to pull under the center of gravity of your body. You see your hands? Put your hands on your stomach, somewhere around your belly button. This is the center of gravity of your body. And you need to pull right at the center of gravity in order to move forward. If you pull to the side, it's easier, but you don't go, you're not going anywhere. You need to pull right at the center of gravity. And ladies, I think that the wall is the center of gravity of religious coercion in the state of Israel. This is where it is. This morning, we were at the wall for a special prayer for Yom HaIsha, for the International Women's Day. And one of us held the Torah. The Torah was confiscated by the authorities, and we were not able today, Monday, to read from the Torah. This is happening in 2021 in Israel. Men are allowed to read Torah, boys are allowed to read Torah. There are 200 Torah scrolls for men's use in the men's section, and women are searched, body searched, the bag is searched for Torah. This has to come to an end. We must end it. How can you stop it from Brazil? You can. With social media, you can. If there were thousands of women around the planet writing Netanyahu that this is unacceptable, this will change. Ask me how I know. How do I know that things will change? I'll tell you how. Wearing a talit used to be a criminal offense. We're now wearing talitot all the time. Having a kippah, saying Kaddish, praying out loud, lighting a menorah, putting on phylacteries, all these activities were criminalized. Women sat in the detention or were incarcerated for doing these activities. It is now kosher. The one thing that still remains is the right to read Torah. So yes, it's taken 32 years, but with some tenacity, good partnership, we can change it. And why not Brazil? Why not you from Brazil start a national Jewish push for Torah for women at the wall? I have a piece of good news for you, that on the 23rd of March, there will be elections in Israel. And in one of the parties, Labor, the first reform rabbi ever is going to be elected. He is number 4, and Labor is expected to get 6 to 7 seats. Rabbi Gilad Kariv, he already announced that the first thing he will do as a new member of Knesset, having immunity, he will take the Torah scroll of Women on the Wall and he will show up on Rosh Chodesh and he will bring it to us to the women's section. He can't be touched. He's a member of parliament.
Anat, what's the reaction of the police in the site? So you're there. Isn't someone supposed to protect you? In 2021, who can protect the women of the wall?
Since you've been there, you realize the police do not see their job as protecting the minority rights, but actually see their job as protecting the general public, the majority, from our provocation. One by one, police and border police and the Western Wall Heritage Foundation security really think that we threaten Judaism, that we offend the wall. Why do they think that? Because we don't come every day, but they are there every day. And every day, they get some tea and coffee from the rabbi. The rabbi gives them cookies. The rabbi talks to them. The rabbi warns them about this provocative group that they need to protect from. The everyday old boys network is at play. And they really believe that we are there to destroy the holiness and to prevent the holiness at the holiest site. And we find a very hostile police. A good example happened this Rosh Chodesh, new month of Adar, when we came to the wall. And you know, the wall is now divided, unlike what we see behind you, Anna. The wall is now divided into capsules of 20 people in every capsule. In their wisdom, the security forces decided to put us at the point that is the farthest from the wall and the farthest from the men's section. In the parking lot, they put a capsule for women of the wall. However, right next to that capsule is where they hand out coffee, boiling coffee, to hundreds of yeshiva students as they finish to pray. Would you like to see my talit after? Here it is.
Completely spilled.
Can you see it?
Yes, there's coffee everywhere.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. So the considerations were not, what would happen if 300 angry yeshiva students holding boiling coffee in their cups are next to women of the wall? That doesn't make sense from a security point of view. But they weren't thinking about that. They weren't thinking about our security. They were thinking about how to get us as far as possible from everybody else because they see us as provocative. And I want to talk a little bit about being provocative. I know of no woman who made any difference in this world that was not called provocative. I think a day without a provocation is a wasted day. Provoke away, ladies. That's what we're here for. Anything better, anything you do that's more than being a doormat, someone will call you provocative. In what's something you do with your body, with your language, with your time, with your money, someone will say that you're doing it as a provocation. It's a magnet to women. Women who do something different are immediately called provocative. I want it to be music to your ears. The next time someone says you're doing it for attention, you're doing it for provocation, you're in the right way. That's exactly what you should be doing. Please. Music.
Anat, today it's International Women's Day, but some people offer us flowers and say congratulations. Do you think we have something to celebrate in this day, since you, in your just being there to pray, are being attacked like this with boiling coffee in a very disgusting way? Do you think we have something to celebrate today? And what do you think about this day existing in our calendar? Is it important, or do you think it's some misunderstanding maybe?
Look, this is an excellent thought. I agree with you, Anita. We should celebrate women every day, which we don't. We should celebrate the mothers and grandmothers, the sisters and the daughters every day. A day of looking inward and wondering, how far have we come since last year? And in Israel, women get around 50% of what men get for the same job in the municipalities, in the banks, in the Jewish agency, you name it. Women make between 30 and 50% less than their male counterparts. That's what we should be thinking about on International Women's Day. This year has been the worst violent year for domestic violence in Israel. Women are not protected as they should in their homes, and we have 24 shelters for women, and we can't afford the male shelter because a male shelter costs twice as much as a female shelter. And why is that? Do you know? Why incarcerating, putting men in a shelter, these violent men, so they are together and the women are staying home with their children, they are not shipped out. Why does it cost twice as much? Because they're violent and someone has to be there to protect them from each other. And the women, the battered women, they're not violent. No police has to be in the shelter to protect them from each other. So I don't see it as a great achievement that we have so many shelters. No, it's terrible that we have so many shelters. The shelters were invented to show that the Jewish man beats his Jewish wife And the Israeli citizen beats his Arab wife. We know that 250,000 women in Israel suffer from domestic violence. What have we done? Have we done enough to protect them? And it's time to take a look at how women are doing in the army, how women are doing in economics. Are women, how are the professions that are very feminine? How are the salaries there? How do we treat our girls? And on that, we have to do, I don't know how to say cheshbon nefesh, how do we take stock on how well we're doing. I think one of the things that worry me very much is the silencing of women, how women silence each other and how men silence women. I've done a few studies on that, and I found that this is something we really should look at. Who interrupts us when we speak? Who do we compliment for being quiet? I found myself saying to my daughter, "You behaved so well, Tanya. I didn't hear a peeps out of you. What a good girl you are." I said that to my daughter. I suddenly realized what I'm saying. I'm saying being a good girl is to be quiet. Shame on me. So I agree
We're
with
getting
you.
better.
We need to look at these things. And look, the ultimate success is when we have more feminist men. This will be the ultimate success, when men will realize that side by side with us, that it's good for them to have a wife that earns the same as they do, to have a sister that can speak around the Shabbos table without being interrupted, that their daughter will be able to dream about being a housewife or being an astronaut, and both are excellent things for her to dream about. And that in religion, which is my business, that the Jewish religion will step up to realize that the final frontier is giving women a voice in religion. That's the final frontier of feminism.
I now admit that praying with you back in 2013, and I think I did it once more afterwards, it kind of changed my relationship to the wall itself. I felt like from that point on, I felt that I didn't belong there as much as I should. I remember doing that with my chanichim from Taglit, and it completely changed my relationship to the wall. But talking about the women who come with you every month, do they come from different religious practices? How do you all come along? I mean, I know that there are Reform women, there are women from the conservative movement, but also that are Orthodox and modern Orthodox. How do you come along? Have you ever thought of having an affiliation for Women of the Wall?
No, we come from all denominations, and it's one of the biggest challenges. How do we pray from the same siddur, the same prayer book, when we come from different traditions? It took us 6 years to write the Women of the Wall prayer book. 6 years. You've held it in your hands. We fought over every word, but we succeeded. There is one text that we can pray from, and it's respectful to our Orthodox sisters and respectful to our Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, and secular sisters. We did it. We also broke a partition between us and women from abroad. We have Women of the Wall who wake up at 4 in the morning and 2 in the morning all over the world to join us in live stream and to be with us at the wall whenever we pray. And recently, like in the last 5 years, we broke the partition between us and men. The first group of men that started coming to join us were the paratroopers that liberated the wall in the war of 1967. They are now in their 70s, and they say, "We freed the wall from the Jordanians, but you're liberating the wall today." And the fact that you didn't feel at home at the wall breaks my heart. The wall should be a place that a woman like you, particularly when you come with a Taglit group, it should be a place that embraces you, a place that the diversity that your Portuguese is music. The fact that it became an ultra-Orthodox synagogue that rejects any change whatsoever is a shame on the secular government that gave the keys to the most zealot extremist group in Israel. The Orthodox are a large group, but the ultra-Orthodox are a minority group in Israel. They're a minority group around the world, and they were given keys to the Western Wall. I want you to know that recently the Rabbi of the Wall wrote a book, Hilchot HaKotel, the laws of the Kotel, and he, in over 600 and some odd pages, writes two things about women. One, if you're menstruating, don't touch the wall. Second, don't look at the Torah when it is raised in the men's section. You are not to look. You hear me? Keep your eyes down. Don't look at the Torah. Ladies, in a whole book, let me show you the book. Hang in there. It's not a little book. It's a huge book. Look how big it is. There's no picture of a woman in the whole book. And there are only two comments. One, don't touch, and two, don't look. This man has the keys to the holiest site of the Jewish people. Take away the keys. Take it back. He is to be fired. And why do I say that to you? Because I do believe that if you decide that this is something you want to do, it is possible that the message, redemption, will come from Brazil. I need a meshugane. I need a crazy person. I need someone who decides total commitment to ask herself every evening, what have I done today to make sure that the rabbi resigns?
We denounce them for corruption first, and then we move along to the next question. Amanda, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, so before we go to the questions of the public, I would like to ask you, how can we deal, being feminists, with the idea that there are women that choose to be inside the Orthodox world, women that believe their role in the world is to take care of the family? How do we embrace it?
I think that I respect that choice. I have a friend who has 10 children. She's ultra-Orthodox. And the other day she told me, you know, Anat, I did the netilat yadayim ala mita, the washing of the hands on the bed with my 10 children. And there was more holiness in my house than in all this circus that you did at the wall at the same time. While I was at the wall, she washed the hands of her 10 children, and she said there was more holiness there. And she's happy with her life, and she believes that there's a purpose to her life. And as far as being happy, Amanda, I'm not sure that we can promise ourselves and our children as much happiness as she can promise herself and her children. I'm not sure, but I'm not such a big believer in happiness as the be-all of life. I'm not in the business of the pursuit of happiness. I'm in the business of pursuit of meaning. I want to have a life that has meaning. And I gain joy from having meaning. Now, she finds meaning in raising 10 children, washing their hands and teaching them how to be ultra-Orthodox Jews. And more power to her. La briut, gesundheit. It's great. But you know what? There are so many things she'd like to do that she doesn't realize she can do because we made it happen. Yeah, she, for example, can now, she can vote. Feminists opened the door for that. There is now a group of ultra-Orthodox women who's pushing for women to be in the Knesset as ultra-Orthodox women. That Agudat Israel, Degel Torah, Shas will have women in the parties. Who got that idea into their heads? There are in Israel yeshivot for very Orthodox women who become they're not ordained as rabbis, but they are becoming Talmidot Chachamim. Who do you think got that idea in their head? They drive a car. How's that? So much of what she can do is because we were trailblazers and opened the door. Would we live to see a female Orthodox rabbi? Absolutely. The rabbis are very nervous about the women in their midst. The Orthodox women are changing orthodoxy. You know, I wrote a few studies called Segregated for God's Sake on segregation in the public sphere as a result of religion. Who do you think gave me the material? Do you think I stand in line in Ramat Shlomo to find out that there was a segregation between men and women in giving gas masks before the war? Do you think I'm not there? They call me. They call us. Many of them call us. And you know what they say on the phone? Baruch Hashem sheyesh reformim. Thank God there are reforms. Liberate us from our rabbis. They are radical ladies. And in Women of the Wall, the Orthodox faction is the most radical part of our board. Orthodox women are changing, and the rabbis are very nervous about it. And this is why you sit in the back of the bus. You don't talk on the radio. You're not going to get a prize. You're not able to sit next to me on the plane. All this obsession with modesty is a way to keep a woman in her place because the rabbis, and rightfully so, are nervous about what's happening to Orthodox women.
And also, Anat, I think a way of keeping us apart is that men, they like to put women against each other because they know that together we are stronger. So they are very afraid of it, don't you think?
Repeat what you said because I didn't understand. They don't want women to gain together?
No, they don't. Like much men, they don't want women to get together, to be friends, to have relationships, like deep relationships, because they are afraid, because together we are stronger.
Okay. Your rabbi wrote something, but he wrote it in Portuguese.
We're doing a question. I think Malka is going to.
Oh, okay.
Unmute. Okay, so Miriam asked about the latest achievement in the IRAC, the Reform and Conservative Converts recognized in the Law of Return.
Oh, that was last week.
And we wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. And also, what's your relationship to the Jewish Agency at this moment? How is it going?
So here, we won a case that we've been fighting for 15 years, representing 47 converts who refused to go abroad to get converted. They insisted on converting right here in Israel. For a very long time, the government stated that they cannot recognize Reform and Conservative conversions because they can only recognize the official schools that are ratified by the Chief Rabbanut, that are part of the Chief Rabbanut. But 5 years ago, there was a ultra-Orthodox rabbi, very, very extreme, that opened a private ultra-Orthodox school for conversion. Women who convert with him need to cut their hair and put a tichel on and send their children to the most extreme ultra-Orthodox schools. Rabbi Karelitz was recognized by the Chief Rabbanut as a private institution of conversion. This is, how does that affect the reform? We are absolutely different from him. He is very zealot and extreme. We are much more liberal. And yet, from a legal perspective, he opened the door for us. How? Because the minute the Rabbanut was willing to accept that there is a private school for conversion, we are a private school for conversion, same as him. The fact that he's ultra-Orthodox and we're Reform doesn't matter. From a legal perspective, he opened the door for us. And so the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, recognized our 47 converts, and we are celebrating. Of course, there is a backlash, and there are now some terrible things said about the reform, but 47 plaintiffs who waited 15 years are now Israeli citizens. And in fact, our rabbis are getting quite a few calls from people who want to convert.
That's amazing. And what about the Jewish agency? How's it going? I mean, the last time I heard there was a plan for the wall that was Nathan Sharansky like a long time ago. How's that going?
The Jewish agency under Yitzhak Herzog is a very different Jewish agency than the one under Sharansky. And that makes absolutely no sense, because Sharansky is married to an Orthodox woman and he is a right-wing. He did more for Women of the Wall. He had integrity and strength, and he supported us in so many ways. And Bougie Herzog, who is from the labor and supposedly more to our side and supposedly a liberal, has not been like that at all. For example, Pesach Yeshurun, one of the leaders of the Jewish agency, wrote up this morning about our prayer at the wall. He wrote the worst stuff. When Herzog is silent, is not saying a word about it. Very disappointing. So I'm not happy with the Jewish agency. And of course, I will be, once we finish this podcast, I will write a flaming letter to Bougie Herzog with copies to the press telling him that his voice should be heard when someone attacks the Women of the Wall.
Anat, talking a little more about your activism with other groups, what kind of other groups do you relate with, like other minority groups that are also fighting for their rights? Do you have connections with feminist groups of other religions in Israel? What are your other works in this area?
So if you're asking me about Women of the Wall, or you're asking me about the Israel Religious Action Center?
No, the Women of the Wall.
Women of the Wall. So Women of the Wall have something, see, it's a very elegant group. We're fighting for Torah, Talit, Tefillin, and Tefillah at the Western Wall. And we have a lot in common with Christian women, Catholics, who want to start giving communion. Meaning right now, only fathers can give communion, and nuns cannot give communion. Did you know that? Okay, so we link arms with nuns who want to give communion, and also with Muslim women who want to go to Mecca. And there are some things that women are not allowed to do in Mecca, and we are supporting them too. So daughters of Abraham, Christian, Muslim, and Jews, we have something in common. As I mentioned before, the final frontier in feminism is to take over religion. This patriarchal religion, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, needs a kick in the butt, and we will deliver it.
Very nice. And Anat, and still about the group, does the group also get together at other moments to study feminist theory or Judaism, for example? And is there a place to shelter women who are in a vulnerable situation?
This is, look, it's a wonderful initiative. What you're saying is a wonderful initiative, but we are very focused on our 3 T's: Tefillah, Talit, Torah, and Tefillin. We have a very narrow focus, which makes us very powerful, because when you have a focus like stop all all you stop all איך אומרים דיכוי? Stop all oppression. Well, that's a lot of people would want to carry a sign that stop all oppression, but the success is going to be limited because there's so much oppression going on that we are very focused, very deliberate, and there are many things we don't do. I don't think the women of the wall can actually afford the energies that are required to start being a study group. Some of us belong to other study groups, but as women of the wall, when we sit together, we talk about how do we further our strategic goals now that we are 17 days before the election. That's a big enough thing, you know? Who of the members of Knesset are we going to harass this week? Who is going to come with us on Rosh Chodesh Nisan that's coming up? How are we going to sneak the Torah, or are we going to bring the Torah out in the open? These are all serious considerations that require hours of deliberation. Remember, we are from all denominations. We need to respect everybody. So we are focused on what we're focused. But are we educated as feminists? I think we are. But coming from other groups, women of the wall belong to different groups. Yeah, but interesting question.
That is amazing to hear. And just closing on Judaism and how you feel about the institutions around us. Do you still believe that, or maybe you have never believed in that, but do you believe that Judaism is a sexist religion?
Yes, absolutely. Judaism is a patriarchy and is a sexist religion. Does Judaism have the mechanism, the infrastructure to change? Yes. Yes. This is what kept us going for so many thousands of years. We are willing to change. Look at our Jewish law. Jewish law is called, you know what it's called? Halakha. Halakha. Where does halakha come from? What is the verb behind halakha? To move, to walk. It's not amada, to stand. It's to move. Halakha is always moving. We pride ourselves on the changing halakha. The fact that in Israel, for the last 73 years, we have given the keys to Judaism to one zealot, petrified group is a tragedy. And because of their monopoly, hegemony, and right to coerce the rest of us, ultra-Orthodox Judaism in Israel has become corrupt, terribly corrupt. It's a major turnoff. And we need to bring the revolutionary idea that there is more than one way to be Jewish in Israel. More than one way to be a Jew, more than one way to worship at the wall, more than one way to have a family, more than one way to get married, and more than one way to get divorced, and more than one way to get buried, and more than one way to get converted. Yay! And more than one way to observe Shabbat, and more than one way to observe Kashrut. We need to break the Rabbanut. We need to compete in the field of religious services, and may the best rabbi win. And I've got some rabbis who could really kick ass, and they may win. Maybe not in Bnei Brak, but in Tel Aviv, or in Modi'in, or in Haifa, of course. Just as an example of how corrupt Orthodoxy is in Israel, the chief rabbis of Israel today, Rabbi Lau and Rabbi Yosef, are the sons of the chief rabbi of yesterday. You tell me, are there only two families in Israel that can produce a chief rabbi? Just the family Yosef and family Lau? Can't you smell all the way to Brazil that this is corruption? And in between these two rabbis, there was Rabbi Metzger, who served 11 months in jail for bribery. Corruption, corruption. I think that the field of kashrut will benefit if women become kashrut inspectors. Only in Israel, women are not kashrut inspectors. All over the Jewish world, Orthodox people use women in kashrut, but not in Israel. It's only for men. Only in Israel, only men are recognized as rabbis. All over the world, there are women in these capacities. So we need to, Israel has become the one place where Jews don't have freedom of religion. The only democracy on the planet where there is no freedom of religion. We must free Israel from the stronghold of the religious establishment that is now. Do I think there's something wrong with orthodoxy? No, not at all. Nothing is wrong with orthodoxy. If Reform Jews were given such a monopoly and such a way of suffocating all of Israelis, I'm sure we would be as corrupt. It is the monopoly that corrupts absolutely. And what we need is to stop the monopoly.
Anat, looking to the future, do you think that this new generation of women that are being raised in feminism, they can make a huge difference in this scenario that we experience inside Judaism?
Of course, and particularly Orthodox women. I think the bravest feminists I know are Orthodox women. And they are changing orthodoxy from within. And as I mentioned, the rabbis are extremely worried, and rightfully so. They're worried about a woman like Aliza Bloch, who is the mayor of Beit Shemesh. She's an Orthodox woman, and it is with the power of women that she became the mayor of Beit Shemesh. Beit Shemesh is the hub of religious coercion in Israel, and there she is, a woman mayor, and it's the power of women that got her where she is. Is she doing everything I would like? No. Do I like the pace in which she changes stuff? No, she's very slow. But is she a harbinger of wonderful news? Yes, absolutely yes. She's leading somewhere. And it's just a matter of time before we will see women in the Knesset, in the ultra-Orthodox parties. We already see their leadership banging on at the door. Rabbis will not be able to keep them in their place for a long time.
Just I forgot to say, this was a question that Marita Nielsen sent us. So if anyone has questions, we're near to our end, but you can still send us some questions to Anat Hoffman that is with us today.
Okay, Anat, another question, just because we're always talking about elections in our podcast. What are your predictions? I feel like we've been talking about elections in our podcast for a long time, but what are your predictions?
Only a fool will predict, because it's so precarious right now. So every day you hear of another party that maybe will press the threshold or not. Look, if Mansour Abbas, that tiny fraction that fell out of the joint list of the Arab list, if he passes the threshold, in the end, it will be the Mansour Abbas 4 votes that will determine who will be the Prime Minister of Israel. If Kahol Lavan doesn't pass the threshold, if Meretz doesn't pass the threshold, if Smotrich doesn't pass the threshold is 145,000 votes. 3.25% of the kosher votes. What if Smotrich gets to 139,000 and not to 145? All these votes go to hell. What if Meretz is 2 votes under 145? They're not going to, all these votes go to hell. So it's so, right now with the threshold being so close to 4 parties, maybe I should mention 39 parties are running. Only 11 for sure will pass the threshold. We're looking at 4 others that are hovering around the threshold. Ladies, how could I possibly predict?
Okay, so we're closing to an end, and so Anat, how can we relate feminism and the concept of Tikun Olam, or fixing the world, to all this? This is March 8th. This is our day.
Yes.
So do you feel like it's a bit of fixing the world?
So first, look at the number 8. I know Jesus needed 12 apostles, but 8 is the number. 8 women can change the world. If you are 8 women and you decide that having a Torah at the women's section is something that you want to achieve in 2021, you can do it. It is possible. We will help you from Jerusalem. But the fact that you are from Brazil and you care and you're starting a world push towards it, it's possible. Second, Israel is way too important to be left only to Israelis. It is very important that you take part. It is crucial. Israel is in a democratic crisis, and this affects you, and this reflects on you, and will give you meaning to your life, and fun, and joy. The 8 of you will have a wonderful time sitting together and coming up with an idea. What are we doing to help women of the wall to get a Torah, to be able to read and say yes to girls who want to have a bat mitzvah? Finally, I think women of the wall are unsafe. I think it may end with bloodshed. And I want you to think, the 8 of you, what are you going to do if there is bloodshed at the wall this next Rosh Chodesh? What will you do? Where is the Israeli consulate or embassy in Brazil? How are you going to make a nuisance out of yourselves? How are you going to go there and stop traffic and come with a Torah scroll and with girls and say that this is impossible and unacceptable? You have power. You have a nuisance value that you don't realize. Jews of the diaspora have power, even from South America, even from Brazil. I believe it with all my heart. It's just that Israel has made you silent. In the previous generation, to be silent about these things in Israel is to be patriotic. So I'm so glad, this is many years of marriage speaking. I believe that love is what remains after we know the truth. We spoke some very hard truths about Israel. And if you still love Israel, then you have to say, okay, I'm going to mend this problem. I'm going to do everything I can to change that. And it's possible to do it from abroad. I believe because of the world and the Zoom and the technology, and because you guys know what you're doing, I don't. I think that you could do it from Brazil. Imagine that in another year, we will realize that it's 8 women from Brazil, starting on the 8th of March, 2021, that started a campaign that got the Torah to women of the wall and started a whole bat mitzvah industry. You see, here's how a bat mitzvah industry is going to work. If you want to train your daughter to read Torah and lead a congregation, it's going to cost you $1,000. But if you bring mom and mom will learn to read, it's $500. And if you bring grandma and grandma reads 3 psukim, it's for free. We are saying no to girls who wish to have a bat mitzvah. We're saying no because we can't bring a Torah scroll.
So very nice, Anat. Well, we come to the end of this wonderful conversation, and I would like to thank you in the name of the Instituto Brasil Israel, in the name of our podcast, E Eu Com Isso, and in the name of the Shalom community. And it was a privilege to hear your story here today. And so thank you very much. And
call me anytime.
I hope we can have more conversations like this in the future. And for those who were unable to follow us live, this conversation will be recorded on YouTube and in our podcast feed. E Eu Com Isso on Spotify. So this is it. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.